This is Film Tank.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
Oh, I don't know if it's on, but I like it.
You know, we're sitting here like a couple of regular fellas. We're going to make film history.
Can you say that again? Just the way you said it.
Poor baby is starting to lose their head.
They won't know what they're looking at or why they like it, but they'll know they want it.
It's not real time, it's showtime. Are you guys ready?
Hello there again, everyone, and welcome in to episode 217 of Film Tank. Alex Diegman here, along with my usual friends. Actually, my always friends, but my usual co-hosts. They're always my co-hosts. Oh, they're great. Nick
Well,
Cheney,
one of us is.
Nick Cheney
Hey!
and Tucson Egan.
I really appreciate that intro. It was really nice.
Oh.
Yeah. I would say the same about you. You are my always friends and always co-hosts.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you say something?
I feel like there's some tension in the room right now.
It's not coming from me.
Okay, sure.
It's definitely coming from me.
Also, joining us again for, I don't know, almost probably like the 10th time now
More than
is
that.
our friend Anna Bodazadu.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Always.
It is so good to be back here and hang out with you guys.
Oh. Well, we are delighted to have you on this specific episode. Not that we haven't enjoyed having you on the other episodes you've been on, but I know that you have been very interested in doing an episode on this specific film that we're going to talk about today. And it'll be great because I feel like, not that you haven't liked the other movies, but you seem very passionate about this one. So I'm excited to hear you talk about it.
I'm very excited too, and let it be noticed, it was brought up before we had all viewed this film. I had brought this up as a joke to Alex quite some time ago, and here we are. So.
But that's okay, because sometimes...
First of all, we take jokes very seriously here at Film Tank.
Absolutely.
And second of all, there's no such thing as a joke suggestion when it comes to movies.
As here we are.
As I've learned,
that's right.
as we've learned.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So the film we're going to be talking about that is not a joke for this episode is the Reese Witherspoon film Legally Blonde, which came out in 2001, 2002, somewhere in there.
2001.
Yeah.
Anna did make mention that this was a pre-9/11 film, and I do think that's important in the context of some of the socio-political things that are happening in this movie.
It's just such a bad frame of reference for certain films, but I feel like the
No,
context
it is warranted here.
Makes a lot of sense.
It's just really interesting to see it jump forward 2 years after, and it's like, and the tone hasn't changed at all, and it's just like, maybe, I don't know.
Here's the thing.
Does the sequel acknowledge 9/11?
Oh, it's called Red, White, and Blonde. You tell me, Tucson.
No, it does it, though.
I don't remember.
I don't remember
I saw it in the
it either,
theaters,
yeah.
but that's the last time I saw it.
All right.
No, I make jokes, Anna. However, that is an actual school of media study of what we call post 9/11 fiction.
Oh my
Like,
god! So it's
even
not
things
just
that are
me
not
darkly making an
no,
acknowledgement
no,
about
like,
certain films.
even things that are not like explicitly about politics or military or
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
Have a distinct I don't know if you want
Tone.
to call it tone or
Yeah,
whatever.
yes.
That are post 9/11, so to speak.
Dang,
So, yeah.
wild. Anyway,
No, you're onto
Cloverfield is a
something.
post 9/11 monster movie.
So, before we get started, I know a few of us have some things they want to talk about. Not necessarily like a formal weekend review or anything like that. But, so the first thing I wanted to mention, as we've previously talked about famous person's death on this podcast before, as we talked about Prince's death a few years ago. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
2016?
I think David Bowie's stuff as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Abbas Kiarostami.
That's true, too.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention a death that I got to talk about.
Yeah.
Go dead people.
Yeah. So this past week, a very influential NBA player, Kobe Bryant, unfortunately died as he was killed in a helicopter crash along with 8 other people, including his daughter, Gianna. So I very much wanted to make mention of this on the podcast because this is our show, so sometimes whatever, just get to sound off about random things that are happening in pop culture. So I have had a very much love-hate relationship with Kobe Bryant because I found him to be a pretty, I don't want to say fascinating, but interesting figure because of the way that his career went in the NBA, because he was a very, very good basketball player. I think that's something that's like really kind of being missed out now on a lot of this, because a lot of different media outlets, and I understand why, are completely focusing on the human element of his death. But it's interesting to me because everybody I've talked to, whether it be friends or coworkers or anything, all anybody wants to talk about is his basketball career, and I'm the same way. And I feel like it's really interesting the way that people view anyone who they see in a public figure type way. So whenever I think about Kobe Bryant, and I think that this is what's very interesting about his death, and I'm saying it interesting because I have been interested, and I thought I've found the events surrounding pop culture's feelings about his death to be interesting, because I feel like it's just so awkward, because even though we've moved past it, like, his rape case is still always just right there. And it's something that's just so odd to me that it's when somebody dies and they're a public figure who people do not have any ties to, they want to talk about, we want to celebrate him as a person. And by all accounts, he did become a much better person, and he was a good public figure and was a good father to his children and a good husband and whatever. But I just think the whole way of it now is leaving him in such a fascinating place to look back on 10 years from now, because not only was he one of the top 10 to 15 best basketball players of all time, he also had a very high profile rape case that he basically admitted his guilt after the trial was dropped. He admitted,
I think it was part of, I shouldn't even be speaking about this because I only learned about it after the fact, and I actually read an article about, like, you know, sort of unpacking the whole situation. It was basically that he settled the situation out of court, but one of the stipulations was that he had to make a public admission about the nature of it, and basically he admitted to it just short of, like, admitting to a crime.
So here's the thing that where it gets really murky. So he the criminal trial was dropped,
right,
because she refused to testify.
Yeah.
And then the civil suit was settled out of court, and then had his basically
her identity was leaked.
Yeah, but it was very, very looking back on it, it does not feel right. Like, it feels like something's off there. There's a very prominent public figure who is using influence to move on, and then, you know, people just kind of, time does its thing, and we move on, and whatever.
His defense team basically released a bunch of smears about this girl, and then also leaked her her identity, which only fueled that sort of, which was what fueled the decision to not carry on the criminal case. Yeah, and
it's I feel like this was 2003, 2004, so in 2020, I'd like to think that this would have gone differently, but I don't really know about that.
Nope.
So fast forward, I still, years later, watched Laker games and enjoyed watching Kobe Bryant and liked watching him as a person, and I feel like we've had this conversation many times before on this podcast, as we've talked about Roman Polanski sometimes at length on this podcast about separating an artist from art from the artist. And it's hard when it's professional sports because you're literally watching that person doing that thing, not like a director or a painter or something like that.
Yeah, there's almost another level there because instead of it being art, which I think often is very qualitative with sports, while everyone has their own favorite player, their own whatever, it is quantitative. You know, you have literal stats to back it up, and when you have talent, it is there for you to read on the scoreboard and whatnot. So I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so it was always hard for me. I mean, and also too, like that was not at like OJ level, but he was playing in games in other states after his trial that same day in Colorado. So it was like the media was surrounding it, and it was a big deal at the time when it was happening, obviously before social media, smartphones, all that.
Yeah.
But I just find this is just another unfortunate layer into his story that's going to further keep his or make him an even bigger legend, I feel like, which is something that is unfortunately true with people who die much before their time should be up. But I just find it, and I guess it's really terrible to look at it like this, since him and 8 other people died in this helicopter accident. But I just find it to be like almost like blowing my mind that, like, looking back on it, he's one of the greatest players ever. He had this high profile sexual assault rape case, and he died young. Like, those things are always going to be fighting with each other of what's he known for.
Right.
So,
and I gotta say, as someone who has a largely probably left-leaning left-leaning liberal I don't know, group of followers or people I follow on social media, there was a lot less people than I thought there would be that were essentially bringing up that case. It was a lot more just straightforward celebration, which I'm not saying is wrong or right, or anything like that. I guess I just thought it was actually going to be slightly more skewed the other way because of the era that we're in, to the point where I was actually just kind of genuinely surprised. And now it could be because most of the people that spoke on it in the wake of his death were sports fans. And for that, I completely understand. And also, they're not wrong in any sense of the...
I was going to do a big post about it on Facebook, and I decided not to. And not because I was going to have it totally be about his rape case, but at the same time, I just did not want to put that out there. So it's a really weird spot, I feel like. And the other thing is, too, I've never loved Kobe Bryant as a player, so maybe that's part of it where I'm just like, meh. But at the same time, I just feel like the whole thing is just crazy to me.
As a non-sports fan, I didn't know that there was such a large Kobe following outside of the pairing of Kobe and Shaq. Like, I didn't know. I always thought that was the thing, so to speak, when like I said, non-sports fan, so I was not watching it, whatever. But when I heard people talk about it back in the day, I always heard of it. People talk about the two of them in the same way people talked about, Jordan and Scottie Pippen or something like that. Whereas, like, I wouldn't expect if Scottie Pippen died. Now, I would expect if he passes away that people would, celebrate him and whatnot. But I don't know. This feels like a Michael Jordan level.
Yeah, I mean, he was
reaction.
A very influential and he's a very good player, very influential player, was definitely one of the best players through the entirety of his career, and is going to be thought of just that way. But at the same time, man, I feel like I brought up Polanski. Like, I feel like, and it's a little bit different because he's closing in on living a full life here, not like yet, but looks like he will die an old man at some point. But
their situations are not entirely dissimilar because he was charged, but he did not serve his actual sentence. But he the difference being that it feels like an apples to orange situation in such a way, because even though they both involve sexual assault, at least, as fucked as it sounds, at least Kobe actually made a public statement about it and tried to make an admission of fault in sort of a way, even if it was one that just artfully existed just outside of the lines of criminal culpability, that it was sort of designed in that way.
Was Kobe's family murdered by the Manson?
I'm saying that it's not. I'm not
that's
saying
why.
it's.
No, I know, and I'm always throwing that out there because of the fact that that's why it is apples.
It's apples to oranges, because even if
in actuality,
there's a lot of other
none
things
of this shit
play.
matters.
Right?
They both did something.
Right.
Sure.
They both, I would say, clearly did something wrong, and one of them only left the country because he couldn't stay in the country. I fully believe that if Kobe had to leave the country, he would have had the resources and wealth to make that happen.
Absolutely.
And would have done it.
And then continue his career elsewhere, which is exactly what Roman Polanski
The only difference was, I guess, because Polanski was an underage person. So, and that's but that's the thing. I don't think Americans necessarily care more about that person so much as we have these arbitrary hierarchy of, well, if it's underage, not that that's a good thing or anything like that, but then that's quote-unquote worse. And if they're overage, if they're over the age of consent, well, then, you know what, we can still say it's wrong, but probably she still kind of asked for it.
I was going to say, in the sports arena especially, there is a legion of people who would like to put pressure on the victim, saying she's just after money, this kind of thing. Where I was really going with the Polanski comparison, though, is that I feel like if he were to die when he was 50, let's just say he was 50 or whatever, and he were to pass away, could you have a piece written about him and not comment?
No, absolutely not. Right. Yeah, no, that's what's interesting about it. I agree with you that, and that's kind of what I noticed, where I'm like, wow, there's a lot of people just not wanting to bring it up. And I don't think it was in any way cowardly or anything like that, but it perplexes me in the age of Me Too, which is in no way the definitive era on sexual assault. If we ever have one, then we will have, quote-unquote, solved the problem, but we, at this point, still haven't or anything like that. So it's not so much that I think that, we've arrived, but the idea that we're through the looking glass, in at least one sense, I was slightly surprised that not only were so few outlets reporting on it, but also that there was the most controversial thing that happened was the one writer who did tweet about it and was suspended for a day because I think it was either the Washington or the Huffington Post. I'll look it up later on in this episode.
I think it was the Washington Post.
Washington Post, where the editors were like, you can't tweet about that because that's wrong. And then, a day later, they're like, no, that was okay. We just had to investigate what she tweeted. And
you couldn't have just read it?
Yep. So anyway, yeah, no, I'm with you that it's a very weird... I just can't believe there hasn't been that many articles that have mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and as I will say that it's not that I believe it more than you do, because it is, I feel like, unable, if you're talking about commenting on someone's social and public figure life, it's impossible to not acknowledge that this, by the way, he's known for being a good basketball player and also this, and it just not commenting on it is such a old way of well, we don't talk about things like that. You should, because this was a really, really awful time, and it shows just how that system is still in play. And
imagine being that person, that victim and that victim's family and that victim's friends, to see this and to see so little mention when it was so high profile. The idea that it was that high profile so many years before a movement like Me Too speaks volumes as to how big it was as far as between the two of them and how high profile it got, to where even I remember hearing about it and reading about it, and yet somehow in the aftermath of these last few years, that it wouldn't even merit a mention.
I was going to say, for most people talking about it, and if you talk about people who were like close friends with him and family, it does make sense. But for people in the media or just fans to just completely be like, nope.
Celebrities were tweeting things like, it is one thing to say something like, what a great basketball player, what a talent, whatever. But celebrities were tweeting things like, I've never known a more kind and generous soul. And it's like, well, whether that's true or not, that is not representative of the totality of the public face of who Kobe Bryant
So what
became.
else to be perfectly frank, what else are they supposed to tweet in that sort of situation? Because the way that I see
nobody has ever been a legend in his career like him or something.
The way that I see this is that there are a lot of people who that knew him in person and knew him personally, and were speaking from that experience. I understand that from an outsider looking in, that it looks really suspect to not even like square that with sort of the equation. But there were a lot of fucking moving parts that were happening on fucking Sunday. I had to check out because at one point they were reporting that all of his family was dead, and I just figured, you know what, I'm just gonna wait to read about it when everybody actually knows what the fuck they're doing, because TMZ and all this other shit is really fucked up. There's like 3 major parts in this. It's like he had a high profile like sexual assault case in 2003 that was settled out of court that he made an admission to. He was one of the most colossal like basketball players of his generation for his location, and was a hero to a lot of people in his hometown. And the third and final piece, I think, is that he died in what is probably one of the most spectacularly grim situations of a celebrity in recent memory, where he dies in a fucking like helicopter accident along with 7 other people, including his 13-year-old daughter. How do you fucking thread the needle on that in a fucking tweet? You can't.
You can, but the people attempt to do. And I'm sorry, but if you make the attempt, then you open yourself to analysis. And
that's why I just didn't tweet anything, because one, I have no fucking personal investment in Kobe.
I'm talking about celebrities.
In Kobe Bryant.
You don't have to get so defensive.
Everybody is fucking tweeting. Everybody's fucking talking about this shit. Everybody's fucking yelling about it. It's like sometimes it's just better to not.
When I agree, and that's what I was pointing out, in the sense that if you can't articulate, I would say, something that is more true to I'm sorry, but a agreeable version of the truth, then maybe just don't tweet at all. Like, and that's kind of what I was trying to say.
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, like, since when was the last time that somebody like was on Twitter and gave a second thought to what they were about to tweet about a major like event that was going on?
Okay.
We're conditioned by those same platforms to just say the first thing that comes on our fucking heads. We just reduce it to a fucking aphorism.
Yeah, just because people necessarily don't always do that doesn't mean that we can't aspire to that or want better of people that... I guess you have a higher standard of people on Twitter than I do, because I see that. I'm just not going to accept it.
That's fine. Yeah.
So, going off of what Toussaint is talking about, though, I will say I, unfortunately, and I feel stupid for this, but I fell victim to the all of his daughters were in the helicopter thing.
As did I.
And I will say
probably everybody did.
Yeah, I think
didn't tweet anything, but I read about it.
Yeah,
I texted you guys, and I think I texted a couple other friends. I was like, shit, like, look at this. But here's the problem, and this is where it gets really murky, for me at least, is that, and this is getting to a whole different topic, so we will get off this because we have a whole episode to do, and you guys have other things you want to talk about. But I just want to say this because I was thinking about it, and it was really annoying me.
This.
Okay. It was really annoying me afterwards, and that is something where there is this idea that if an account has a blue check mark by it, it has to be fact, because they are a verified source, and if it's a news station with a check mark, I at least up until Sunday, thought that they were checking sources before just tweeting whatever, and yet the ABC affiliate in Los Angeles tweeted out this, and I'm just like, holy shit! How are you like? Are you just so desperate for clicks in this horrible situation where clearly your news station is going to get plenty of coverage on this no matter what?
It's how high-profile grief functions on social media, where something breaking happens and everybody wants to have their word in. I don't understand why the fuck that is, but it's like a fucking sinkhole and everybody wants to just dive in.
I think it's more about the problem with where we honestly are right now, where this is like a large part of our political problems, not entirely, but this idea that there is a whole legion of people out there who are not just like me, who during this like got blindsided by just saying, oh, this looks real. Like, there are people out there who see anything from a source that they believe is reliable and they take it as fact and they live their lives by that. And it's just like why are people so fucking bad? I don't know. That's a total sidebar from where I was, but it really infuriated me on Sunday because I was part of the problem, because I was then fueling this fire and telling people, oh, I guess maybe all of his family dies. That's terrible. And afterwards, I'm just like, that's so stupid. Like, why wouldn't I just wait and find out the facts about it? But I thought I knew that. It's fine. I was so angry about it.
The never-ending debate in journalism: getting it first or getting it right.
Well,
so in the age of social media, that is
Right
ballooned and skyrocketed and microscoped and that whole thing.
But if you get it first and you're wrong, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
at least you tried.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I won't go off on that, but I don't know. I just yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, but those are most of them.
Okay. Well, that went on for way longer than I thought it was going to, so sorry about that. But
No.
Don't apologize.
Yeah, I just wanted to...
Never apologize.
Oh. Okay.
For anything.
Especially...
Even if you're wrong.
Okay. No, it's, really, really, it is pretty unfortunate and sad that all of that played out the way it did, no matter who it was. But yeah, I just wanted to give my thoughts, and I did like Kobe Bryant, the basketball player, and grew to like him more as I watched him play further on in his career. And maybe he was a good person, but I didn't know him. All I knew about him was he was a good basketball player and probably did some bad things. Yep. So, yeah. So, moving on. You guys both had something you wanted to mention, so I don't know who wants to go first, but take it away.
I'll go first. Well, speaking of microaggressions on social media, I have started watching a televisual project on the company streaming site known as the Netflix. There is a new show on Netflix based off of a property out of the UK. It's a reality show called The Circle.
I've been seeing a lot about this.
Yes,
Continue.
and I finally succumbed to trying it out.
Ooh, I have to too.
Is that based on that movie?
No, it's not.
No, it's not. I'm actually.
I mean, I know it's
the
about
book.
social
Okay,
media,
so
but it's not about that at all.
It's not about that concept
No.
at all. It's a totally different thing.
I'm actually
All right.
reading that book. Okay, aside, I'm reading that book, and the book is like way better, and there's like way more sex in it. Anyway, go ahead.
Fun fact about that
Thank
book.
you, Anna.
Fun fact about that book.
Yes.
By what's his name?
Dave
Eggers.
Yeah. Randomly in that book, I only know this because I work at a library, and we did we do a book discussion every month. One month it was that book, like 4 or 5 years ago. Randomly in that book, St. Charles, because it does take place in Illinois, and St. Charles, for anyone who doesn't know, I guess you can look me up and kill me if you want, but I live in St. Charles. Randomly, St. Charles is name-checked in that book. And
It is. I noticed that.
We wrote to the author as librarians to ask if that was, like, made up, or if he actually, and he goes, no, I stopped in St. Charles when I was in Illinois, so of course I wanted to mention it. And we
That's
were
so
like,
cool.
aww.
That is so cool.
And it's adorable. So, The Circle, the reality television program, is a show on Netflix now, and it is basically what you think it is in the sense that it is a reality contest in which strangers go to live for a period of time and engage in a popularity contest for cash prize, right? However, the strangers do not live together. They live in separate apartments, and they will never meet each other face to face, and they can only interact with each other through The Circle, which is the de facto made up for the show social media website. And I got to admit, I think this is fascinating. It is reality television, so if you're just turned off by that, in general, it is not reinventing the wheel. However, I do think reality television as a genre has its merits. There's a gluttony of horrible reality television programming, but the actual kind of 1% that's actually making good use of that kind of mode is worthwhile, and I think this is actually one of them. The weird fascination I have with it comes from two things, which is that, one, if you think about the concept of the show and when you watch it, it is so bizarre to me that a show is actually making it, because it is getting kind of a lot of buzz online, when no character is talking to each other. Every character, obviously, I should say every person, but every person has to talk to the camera, or, in a very smart move, The Circle, the social media site, is voice activated. They don't get keyboards, so they have to say their messages to the TV and whatnot. So everything is spoken out loud, but it's at this weird distance where no one's actually having conversations, to each other so much as at each other. And I gotta admit, I'm very much digging it. The weird micro judgments that everybody is making based off of these little things, I think are actually on point. I don't know that the show in and of itself is out to say something about social media so much as it just inherently does say something about users of social media. I mean, you take one sentence and a different emoji can change the entire context of that sentence. If it's a smiley face, it's a friendly, compassionate thing. If it's a winky face, now it's become flirtatious. And the way the other characters are... I always say characters because I know that reality television is scripted to a degree, but I don't think that makes it actually worthless. I actually think most reality shows should be scripted because reality itself is fucking awful in hell. But
I agree.
But the contestants, when they read into these moments, I'm like, you know what? This is weirdly fascinating because on the one hand, there's a game, to quote Sherlock Holmes, a game is afoot. And so it's like, on the one hand, while I do think they're being hyper vigilant about everything, on the other hand, that's actually what we're doing day to day. Their first task is to choose one profile picture. And after that, they'll add other ones, like one new one, maybe every 3 days. But the way that piecemeals makes every picture count. And literally, someone goes home in the very first episode because of the picture they chose, if not subliminally. It's not like they were like, oh, we hate that picture. But if she had chosen a different picture, she probably could have saved herself. And I know that sounds weird, but I'm just trying not to spoil exactly what happened. And it's fascinating. 2 out of the 8 people that start the show are actually catfishers because you are allowed to be someone you're not. You can use other people's pictures if you know them and have the, because, for example, one guy is like, you know what, hot girls online get more attention, so therefore I'm going as my girlfriend, who is an attractive lady, you know what I mean? So he's putting up her photos and pretending to be her, whatnot. And I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I think it's only 12 episodes long. It's already over, so it's not like a huge, and it's on Netflix, so you can watch the whole thing now. Not a huge time commitment, but you could do much worse if you've ever wanted to dip your toes in the reality television pond than The Circle. And clearly Netflix is a fan of this now because not only did they greenlight the season, they've already renewed it for a second season, and they're going to start adding other countries' seasons that they're doing, like The Circle France and The Circle, which I probably will eat up even more than the regular U.S. season, because I'm always fascinated by, like, when I hear about, like, Big Brother Brazil or something, you know. So, The Circle, I think, is honestly... watch the first episode, and if you're not hooked by the end of the first episode, because there is a cliffhanger, which I never thought I would be actually hooked by on a reality TV show, but it did work on me. If you're not hooked by that, then it's probably not for you. But try to get past the first 30 minutes, because they have to go through about 25 to 30 minutes of introductions of all the characters in a way that no other reality show usually has to, because usually the characters can do like a 1-minute introduction and then introduce themselves to the other people. But because they can't quite go into monologues and whatnot, they have to get all of that out of the way first. So anyway, The Circle is on Netflix. I highly recommend giving it a chance, because I find it very weirdly soothing to watch.
Very well. Tucson.
I've been watching The Outsider on HBO.
Oh,
as have I.
Because I still have my HBO account after Watchmen. I figured, I might as well watch whatever else comes up. And there's some good shows that are coming out this year. There's Westworld, so I'm looking forward to that.
Oh my God, Aaron Paul is going to be in this season.
Yes, he is. They have it's got Jason Bateman, it's got Ben Mendelsohn, and it's got this one actress. What's her name? Cynthia Erivo?
Oh, yes, from
Harriet?
Ervio. Yeah, Cynthia.
Yeah, she's from Bad Times at the El Royale.
Yes.
Amongst other things.
Yes.
She was also in that movie. I think she was in the movie Widows.
Yeah.
Yep, and she was Harriet.
Yeah.
That's
Tubman.
Yeah, that
In Harriet.
Tubman.
Pause, Tubman.
Yeah. It's only 4 episodes, and it's a limited series because it's actually based on Stephen King's novel, the supernatural, like, murder thriller, The Outsider. It's a slow burn, but I'm actually enjoying the slow burn for it is right now, just because it's just so grotesque and enthralling in, like, sort of the details of it, and I just I'm looking forward to seeing where it culminates, because I think that Cynthia's character is really fascinating, and it's like all the main characters are really cool. Yeah.
Is this a planned limited series? Or
Yeah,
is this,
it's planned. It's just 10 episodes.
Nick is
I
not so sure.
I think I've heard rumblings that that's what they're calling it for right now. However, I don't think that... I don't know. Anything can go for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow upped it for another season.
I mean, as long as, like, it's... So far, I can only say that off of the first 4 episodes that I've watched, it looks really good, and I'm looking forward to, like... I just find myself watching the new episode when it comes out. I don't, like, look forward to it, but I'm like, oh, new Outsider episode. It's like, I'll watch that. And if depending on what they do at the end of this season, if they want to, like, pick it up for another one, I'm like, so far I'm in.
Yeah, I gotta say I have been watching this as well because of my boy Ben Mendelsohn, and I love him, and he's great in this.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, one of my favorite things about this show is that they released the first 2 episodes, or actually they aired the first 2 episodes together.
They did.
On the same night.
Oh.
And I actually think that was a smart decision, because the show that it becomes in the second episode is not the show that starts out in the first episode, even though the first episode is good and engaging. And I'm very excited to see where it's going to go from here. I think it definitely has a very good visual palette.
I feel like we're just now, at least at this point, learning about the killer's nature and modus operandi.
Yeah.
So, like, that's something that I'm looking forward to them going more into.
Yeah. It's a very good police procedural that still happens to have very eerie supernatural underpinnings, basically.
And it's not hammy or anything. It's like it's very stark. It's very good. It's not what I usually expect from a Stephen King adaptation, unfortunately, but it's good.
Agree.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Anna, do you have anything you want to talk about, or are you ready to dive right into Legally Blonde?
I'm ready to dive right into
All
Legally
right.
Blonde.
Excellent.
Thank you for asking.
Oh yeah. So this movie, as I mentioned, you mentioned in more detail that you'd said it to me as a joke, pretty much. So, and I I've got to say, and maybe this comes from my years of hanging around with Nick, but you shouldn't say something if you don't really mean it, because I was like, we should do an episode on this if this is something you actually like, and by all accounts, you love this movie. You don't?
Of course I do.
Well, there you go.
No,
Well,
it's so funny because you're saying that, like, because you could obviously tell that I love it.
I do. But you shouldn't discount your love of it. You shouldn't say, "Oh, this is a stupid movie" or whatever. Like you should actually love it and
I do.
talk passionately about it and think passionately about it. So I'm glad we're doing an episode on it. And I will say, I know myself and Toussaint had not seen this in many years. I know Toussaint had never seen it before, and Nick, I don't know how many times he's seen it, but he had not seen it very, recently.
I saw it all the time when I was back when it came out, but I haven't seen it in probably a decade.
Yeah, I feel like the vibe was really positive, so I think you're in pretty good shape. So, the film Legally Blonde surrounds Elle Woods, a fashionable sorority queen who is dumped by her boyfriend. She decides to follow him to law school. While she is there, she figures out that there is more to her than just her looks. Okay. So, the film was directed by Robert Luketic, believe his name is, and he's got a real unfortunate career because he directed the movies 21, also the movie Killers with Katherine Heigl and Ashton Kutcher, back when Katherine Heigl was kind of a thing.
Oh my gosh.
And speaking of Katherine Heigl, he also directed The Ugly Truth with Katherine Heigl and Gerard Butler, which I heard was just terrible. So there you go. So, this film stars Reese Witherspoon as Elle Woods and also features Luke Wilson, Selma Blair, Matthew Davis as Warner, and then features some other people as well, including Victor Garber, Jennifer Coolidge, Holland Taylor, and also Allie Larder, who shows up as the woman who needs defending. Her character's name is Brooke Taylor Wyndham. So, Anna, I think you have to start us off and tell us all about your feelings on Legally Blonde, because I really do like how much you like it, and I think that's awesome. And there are not many movies that I, at least on a regular basis on this podcast, I'm so excited that you guys are watching this. I'm more like, I'm going to force you guys to watch this, and then we're going to do an episode on it, and you're all going to just look at me in disgust. So go ahead.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for passing the baton, which you should get.
I should get a physical baton, and then we'll get passed around. It'll be
speaking stick.
Yes, the talking stick. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to you all for agreeing to do an episode on this and watching it together.
Well, you are welcome, but you never have to thank us for that.
Well, I want to.
Well, that's sweet.
So, okay. Legally Blonde, where do I begin? So, my personal frame of reference is that I feel like I watched this movie constantly when I was younger. I know this was a film that was shown on TV all the time. I can't really think of like the particular channels, but it was just on TV constantly. And then I have a VHS copy at home, and it always was like just kind of in my film conscience, so to speak. Like, there are just some things in this movie that are so unforgettable. Happy people just don't shoot their husbands. Ammonium thioglycolite. It goes on and on.
What was that one quote from the sort of introduction circle where the lady says she was leading the group, like lesbians against drunk driving or something like that?
Yes, lesbians against drug driving. That's you're talking about like the character that says that, that talks about herself.
I'm talking about that line. Yeah,
yes.
It was just like, and that just stuck out to me.
They're against it too.
I mean, yeah, it was just like it's just like why a group explicitly like, okay, well, that's fine. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So, and now as we watched it this evening, it's just so funny, the things that flew over my head as I was older. Now I understand so much. When I was younger, now I understand so much better now that I'm older. and it is so great. Speaking as resident woman, TM.
Resident woman. I just read that in the Resident Evil voice. Resident woman.
Speaking
TM.
in a room with a bunch of men.
Thank you.
This movie is this film is so good to me because some elements, I will agree, didn't age the best. There are some stereotypes in here that aren't great. They're a little bit cringy, but I think overall this is how I see it. We get the start and the beginning, very clear. The bookends and this movie I think are great. Elle Woods is a person who is a sorority girl, fashion merchandising major, wants to go to Yale specifically to win back her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Who she wants to be her fiance so badly. Never loses sight of her self-awareness, is always a good person, is always there for her friends, makes friends everywhere she goes, and on the brightest side of things, does not care and focuses on her goals and not hurting others. And I think that is so gosh darn inspiring. I feel like to some degree, this is what Mean Girls thinks it wants to be.
Ooh.
I think this just takes the cake in the type of film that is just so powerful and meaningful because it moves the trope on its head of a dumb blonde. And granted, unfortunately, I don't think it's new, but you don't have to be ruthless and cutthroat. You don't have to be a bad person. We see here that it turns out Warner shows his true colors his entire time when he says, Elle, just think about yourself. Who cares about so-and-so? When Elle actually gets the alibi from Ellie Larder's character. It is just so inspiring to see a person who is not afraid to be themselves and still work hard to be successful to get exactly what they want. And that's why I love this movie so much. It definitely made me not be afraid to be super nice to people that I don't even know. It made me not afraid to interact with others in a professional setting. I was personally just at a conference where I had to go into a room of people that I didn't know and only emailed a few of them and tried my best to be like, hi, I'm this person. I work at this company. And pretty much this is what Elle Woods does the entire film. She makes friends with people who immediately brush her off because they just take a look at her optics and say she's not good enough for law school. She dresses in these loud colors. She's from Los Angeles and she doesn't care. She takes Bruiser into her dorm and says, oh, don't worry, Bruiser, everyone's going to like you, while everyone is very clearly staring at her in her huge U-Haul. No one else has that, obviously.
They already moved in.
Yeah, I guess they were already moved in.
They
but
had rider trucks. So.
And it's so wonderful. Everything about this movie, it makes me so happy. And I feel like this is quotable to no end. I feel like it inspires people, I guess women specifically, but I hope this inspires lots of people to go exactly for what they want and just, offer help, be kind, and be yourself. So I love that. Anyone else want to go?
Yeah, no, I also was a fan. I mean, I didn't love this movie, but I also thought it was pretty good. I thought that this did, looking at this era of films, and we talked about it being a pre 9/11 film. A lot of these movies, a lot of these movies and their tropes and some of their dialogue is not amazing. And this film certainly isn't as guilty as something like Can't Hardly Wait or something like that, or even like Rat Race we talked about on the last episode, where it's got moments that you just look back and you're like, oh no. But even though there is a little bit of that here, this still has this like really era specific feel of people having a good time, learning lessons. Has a lot of bright colors in this, and not just because of her outfits, but like a lot of the set design, a lot of the lighting in this feels warm. It feels like people are having a good time. People are having meaningful experiences, and it just has more of a bright outlook on things. And I feel like a lot of films of this era had that feel to them. And maybe that's just because these are what I remember watching then, and I was 13 years old and I had my whole life in front of me and all that shit. But at the same time, looking back on it, I don't feel like
Nick is shaking his head.
we get a lot of films like this, and the films we do get like this in the current era are definitely a little more grounded, unfortunately, in reality, whatever that is, because
Whatever that is anymore.
yeah, I mean, there's
Reality these days just means grim, which is not actually,
fucking Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, I mean, no, but it's true in the sense that, like, even, like, the romantic comedies or whatever, like, well, I won't go off on a tangent, but, like, even the ones who are trying to be, shall we say, I don't know, I don't want to say that. I was going to say woke or whatnot, which is an admirable thing to be if you're striving to be
Socially conscious.
Yeah. However, it also, I think, sometimes mistakes a sour attitude, which, if you're going to make a romantic comedy, is not always the greatest approach.
Kind of antithetical to a romantic comedy.
Yeah. There should be some kind of, I think, disillusion there.
Yep. I've liked a lot of her work throughout her career, but I do feel like Reese Witherspoon was doing her best work in this era, because I think she's fantastic in the movie Election as well, which came out a couple of years before this.
I would put that, this, and Walk the Line as her three greatest roles.
Yep. Ooh, I agree with you. Yeah. Walk the Line is one of my favorite movies.
It's a great movie.
Yep.
So I was a fan. Again, I didn't love this, but I also thought this was pretty good and definitely a good time to watch with friends, and I'm sure by yourself too. It would just be a
You can watch it by yourself. It's okay, guys.
All right, moving on to whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I'll go next.
Physical baton coming your way.
Oh, it's heavy. I watched this. I want to say I may have seen this in theater. If I didn't, I saw it when it came out on video, like day one, for whatever reason, and I watched it countless times after that. I had the DVD. I watched it numerous times. I remember as a child, I had a fascination with courtroom drama, and yet almost all of the John Grisham adaptation bored me because I was a child or whatever.
You so Runaway Jury?
Actually, I did like that one.
Yeah.
But Legally Blonde was...
Gene Hackman.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay. Anyone else in that movie before we...
Well, Gene Hackman's the only one that... Well, actually, what's his name?
Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
And
John Cusack.
John Cusack, yeah.
Yep, and Rachel Weisz. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones.
Here we go.
Sorry about that.
No. So, but here comes Legally Blonde, who, I should say the movie, approaches...
Legally Blonde, the person.
Like Citizen Kane and Legally Blonde, the power couple. No. But this movie just approaches that... Not that it's a straightforward courtroom drama, but obviously legal themes are abundant. But it has that kind of fun with that genre in a way that had not really been done before, and really since. But I am a big fan of this movie, actually. I definitely was skeptical as to whether it was going to hold up since I had last seen it, and it totally does. Elle Woods is definitely, I think, one of the iconic female-empowered characters in all of cinema. I mean, I just don't think that's in question whether you like the movie or not. This was a cultural touchstone when it came out. And if you rewatch it, it remains one as far as the power behind her positive vibes and just ultimate faith in other people and sisterhood in general. And I just thought that whole part of it was fantastic. And even the part about how the whole setup for this movie is her following her ex-boyfriend to, whatever. Like, that doesn't bother me at all because of the fact that that's every rom-com. almost every rom-com is somebody doing something stupid and besides themselves and beneath themselves, I should say, in order to win the person they love. Except in this movie, they realize that the person they love the most is themselves, and not in a conceited way, but in a way where they actually put the value on themselves instead of the other person. And that's what allows them to find another person who sees that in them in a way that the other person, their ex-person, didn't. So even that part completely works for me as a journey of self-discovery. There's so much about this movie that works that was kind of surprising to rewatch. The Luke Wilson character, when was the last time we saw a quote-unquote nice guy character that actually was just a good person?
Yeah.
and totally worked. And because I love the fact that we don't even get to see them have like a final like kiss or anything like that. Like, I'm sorry, but the epilogue with the text, whatever, like, there is no cuter capstone to that relationship than us just kind of getting that final wink that they are a couple with. He's going to propose to
Though at the
her
same time, she's not
tonight.
defined by her relationship, but by her, like, her accomplishment.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I absolutely love that, and for Elle to go through all of this, what I love is from the very first scene, we are never told as a viewer that she is stupid or, you know, shallow or anything like that.
Quite the contrary.
Exactly.
Actually, yeah.
Like, there are even moments in the very beginning when it's hinted that she is super smart, like when she says she has her 4.0 and whatnot. But it is very easy for her, especially when I was like a child and even as a grown man, to make assumptions when you see some of the things that happen in the very beginning, like the montage of her getting ready or whatnot.
When she dressed down that one saleswoman in the clothing store and actually called her out on like her pitch.
And it's great. And so the fact is that she doesn't realize that that's that's who she is, and that's she's so much more than what a person tells her she is, whether it's Warren telling her, you know, she's not serious, or the sales clerk demeaning her as, you know, whatever. I mean, think about this. This came out in 2001, and this actually, I think, is responsible for killing a trope. We don't do stories or jokes about dumb blondes. Like, that was a thing for a long time.
Yeah, for a long time.
And then this movie came out, and I'm not saying there wasn't like a grace period after the movie, but we're not still doing those, and we now know that that's, besides the fact that it's just not cool, but like it's just not funny or whatever. Like, you can't really say that about a lot of movies.
As much as there are parts of this film that seem of its time, even within like the context of like a rom-com. Like, it's startlingly progressive.
Yeah,
it feels like just by its central conceit, like it just feels like progressive, even to just like move that character out of that blonde, ditzy like sort of stereotype and actually showing like a character that has depth and an acknowledgement of self-worth.
Yeah. And, you know, even some of the things that would kind of have a different, not a different connotation today, but certainly time does change everything, so it's hard to look at something the same 20 years later than it was back then. But the scene in which Callahan makes a pass at her, like, there are movies today that would somehow still make that moment about him. And yet, the moment that happens, the scene almost abruptly, I would say, shifts to the point where it makes sure to have a focus, other than obviously Selma Blair's character mistaking what's going on, but that's between Elle and her. But there is no possible way to watch that scene and see anything other than a woman standing up for herself and not letting even that moment define who she is. Now, she goes through a crisis of faith for a moment, because understandably that's a low blow. I mean, nobody should experience that, let alone be asked to, continue without skipping a beat from that kind of moment. But you don't get the sense that he had all the power in that dynamic, and therefore that's why she was like quitting. It's more just that that was like the final straw. Like, she had been told all throughout her entire journey that she was not good enough, that, whatever. So here now was her actual superior essentially saying that, even if he doesn't think that that's what he's saying, but that's exactly what he's saying. And so that's why I think she decided to quit. And it takes a woman, and I don't think that that's in and of itself a sexist note to, to display, to basically say for her other professor, who I don't think she actually noticed as much, and I think that was kind of a lesson for her, which is, as much as she preaches it and practices it, which is, like female empowerment and sisterhood or whatever, but that, maybe there was another professor there all along that could actually empower you in a way that Callahan wasn't able to. And so anyway, I just found that entire third act to be way more engrossing than I thought it could actually live up to from when I used to watch this movie a long time ago.
So that particular exchange between Elle and Callahan, obviously, where he makes a very aggressive pass at her and she rightfully lets him know that this is bullshit, I'm leaving, see you later, fucker. That's not exactly, I think, the dialogue that they used. Anyways, so what I like about the build-up to that is I feel like that wasn't like something that was hinted at, that, oh, he's like in the background, like just trying to only have her there because they're like...
I remember that being in like when I watched it for the first time when I was a child, like being that like a twist. Like, and I feel like that's actually a good lesson in male chauvinism, which is that so many bad people can basically go about their day-to-day without having everything be about that. But when it comes down to it, that's what they expect.
I.e. behind closed doors, literally and metaphorically in this sense. Yes.
But he wasn't, even though like the overly nice person who was just like, you're right, like he is still kind of a dick to her. Yeah. But at the same time, he also has sort of a really good introduction. Like, he's a person who thinks to take her seriously and whatever. So it just felt pretty genuine, actually.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, in a obviously ends up being a bad way for because that character ends up being a pretty terrible person. But at the same time, it's not like it was built up as he was like a comic book villain or something like that, who's just going to show up twiddling his mustache, trying to make a pass at her.
However, one of my favorite things about rewatching it was if you actually contrast the two introduction scenes to the two professors, there is an actual difference in the way that they both quote unquote pick on Elle Woods, which is that I forget what her name is because unfortunately she's not in the movie that often, but the one
Holland Taylor's character.
Yes, Holland Taylor's character, when she calls on her, she is obviously calling on her because she's judging her, but I don't think for obvious reasons she's judging her because she's a woman, but because of her setup and like, what are you doing here in the school with, everything that's in front of me. And once Elle is not able to answer the question because she doesn't actually linger on that and then decide to basically embarrass her other than sending her out of the class, which I think is actually a hard lesson to learn. Whereas I do think Callahan is slightly more in the like, I can't remember the exact whatever the first name, but it was slightly of a dismissive like, oh yeah, you can sit in the front row and be pretty, like you're whatever, and I don't know.
I will say it's hard because I have such a strong opinion about bullying, especially from professors or superiors or whatever. But at the same time, I felt like that was actually the way she spoke about it was actually pretty important in that situation, because her saying, first of all, her saying something to another student about her leaving is really unprofessional. But at the same time, her saying the words of, well, I want her to leave until she's actually prepared to be in this conversation is really important, because she's not just saying, please leave because of that. She's saying, actually, no, you need to like be ready to partake in this class you are enrolled in.
She's also imparting the same lesson that I think Callahan will try to teach her in the very first interaction, which is that you have to have thick skin in order to survive the blood in the water of your shark peers, and now I'm kind of quoting from the musical, which I have seen and quite enjoy. But I agree in that, there is kind of a weird, icky line. It's not like quite like Whiplash or anything like that, but there is definitely some tough love there. But it's almost tough love as basically like, go do this and then come back, you know. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm done with my initial thoughts.
Toussaint.
I don't have anywhere near as thought out of a sort of impression of this film, but I'm just gonna try to like take a swing at it. I've never seen this film before, aside from the conclusion, which I usually caught like on Comedy Central when I was like in, I don't know, maybe like high school or like college. That sounds around about that time. And I actually really enjoyed this. I actually found myself to be pretty engaged and pretty invested in the character of Elle, just because she seems like, you watch it at first and you think that it's going to just like lean into that trope of her just being this ditzy airhead, but really she's actually just a very like a very likable, very empathizable character. Like, you want to see her succeed. You want her to go to Harvard Law School for her own reasons, not just to win back her man. I was maybe I was the only person that picked up on this, but when Selma Blair's character is introduced with the wedding ring, I made a note of like the boyfriend had told her about Elle, and so I assumed, like, just because like her boyfriend is her ex, it was coded this way, that he seems like the type of guy who would be dating two women at the same time, one that he's being serious with and one that he can't be serious with. That really is more of like his I got that impression from that sort of that encounter. I see what you're saying. I will say I read it slightly different, which is to say that while I do think he's the kind of guy that would do it, I think it was more indicative of the fact that it's a one-way street, which is that when he got back together with Selma Blair, she's a serious person, so therefore he would tell her about Elle because she's the punchline, whereas he's not going to waste Elle's time by telling her about the other, because that's a real person, and Elle would never be interested in hearing about real people. I just thought it was very suspicious with the timeline of they knew each other in prep school and then through undergrad, and then they got back together that following summer before they started Harvard Law School and got engaged. Yeah. That to me seems like there's shallow white people. I mean, yeah, they could be shallow white people.
There also is heavy political context behind their relationship together,
right?
Because he's from a well-known family, and so is she. Elle Woods just comes from money,
right,
on the West
Coast.
Right.
I seriously believe, just with the way that he was talking to her and the way that he addressed her after they broke up, I wouldn't put it past the guy. I don't think it's entirely outside of the realm of possibility that he would do something like that.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I did not interpret that scene that way, but I can definitely understand that. So I think it's so cool. Anyway,
enough about him. Like the actual like social like landscape of Harvard Law School as it's depicted in this was really fascinating to me, because it just speaks to the stereotypes that this film are playing with are actually really interesting. Just like like, who are the kinds of people that go to Harvard Law School? The kind of people that wear genius on their shirt, the kind of people who come from maybe a very highly politicized and very like radical sort of like background, or maybe there's like just the guys who like, my father was a lawyer and my father's father was a lawyer, and I really don't know what the hell I'm doing here, but you know what? I was just told to like sit down, eat shit, and smile, and I'll have like a multi-million-dollar like career. I felt like all those sort of like personalities were sort of swimming in that pool, and how they sort of like began to meld together speaks to how academia just like chews up raw material, like a particular type of demographic, a very particular type of social background, and then spits out a very type of product, and how she just did not like meet up to the fodder of what they were looking for, but she was exactly what, like, the kind of person that could survive and could thrive in that sort of environment. So it speaks to just like how, I don't know, society as a whole, even on like whether on a micro scale of academia or even on a larger sense, just does not know how to really square with the true worth of the people that actually inhabit it. and I thought that was really that sort of like really touched me. That's what I really enjoyed about the film.
It's almost like Harvard has a horrible admissions process.
It's almost as yeah. Then there's the whole like her Harvard admission like video, and they're talking about it's like, well, you do say that you want more diversity, and I'm just like, yeah, there's nothing more diverse than like a blonde white woman. I was like, that's amazing.
To be fair, and I'm completely in agreement with you, but
Yeah.
I will say 20 years ago that joke did land slightly differently.
Oh yeah,
It did.
Yeah,
In the sense
Yeah.
that it was funny to think of someone like Elle Woods
Yeah.
going to Harvard and whatnot. But I'm completely with you.
I mean,
It's the idea that is quote unquote diversity is pathetic in and of itself.
watching this in a post, I can't even remember the name of the actress who was basically running that whole scheme of like getting like her kids.
Felicity Huffman?
Yeah, Felicity Huffman. Like
And,
in the wake of something like that, and understanding just how
Girl from
Lori
Full
Loughlin?
House.
yeah, how far the
I was-
scales
I
are
was gonna
tipped,
call her Aunt Becky. Sorry.
and how
That's how
She
we
goes
know
by
her.
many names.
and how instrumental,
Especially now.
like where you go to school, like matters in some cases to your prospects. Like we've had a conversation before off, like Mike, where we're talking about how
Oh yeah, we don't talk about that.
where you go to school doesn't really matter in a lot of cases with the case of like the quality of your education. But in the case of that, it's like more of like the social connections and the strata that you actually operate in. And yeah, there's like, it just like, I don't know. It really just sort of like activated a lot of my sort of background thoughts of like academia and how fucked it is as a whole. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was funny. I thought it was endearing, and yeah, and I also like the romantic aspect for her, like sort of like finding like somebody who like empowers her in a way that it's not looking at her just purely on the sense of like her physical appearance, and really just like believing and vouching for, and actually like putting his own career on the line to uplift her and to give her a, like
Honestly, a part of me could read Luke Wilson's character as asexual. Like that's how just genuine he is about, as you were saying, empowering her.
Yeah.
and never
like he doesn't have anything, like he doesn't want anything out of it. Like it's just, he seems just like a pretty good guy, and I'm just like, how the fuck did you end up here at Harvard Law School? Because it seems like every other guy is coded to be like looking for something or angling towards something. I'm just like, huh, interesting.
Yeah, he does have. This is more of a script writing thing than about his character, because Luke Wilson's character is actually pretty good here. As
Yeah.
so you're all saying, but there is that one time when he's trying to pretty much badger the witness when he's trying to ask him all the questions about things, and then get him to spill the beans.
And your
about
boyfriend's
his,
name is?
Yeah, that's not aged well.
Yeah.
but that's all
I
right.
actually thought that was fine.
Oh, really?
Why wouldn't it be? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, here's the thing. I don't think there is an inherent, and okay, I'm saying this as a straight white male, which means that what I'm about to say, I'm speaking about an experience that's not my own, so take it with a grain of salt. However, you can have a gay character be what we would call flamboyant, and it not be, I would say, strictly offensive, if that in and of itself is not what is. I guess I never thought of him as the butt of the joke, because when, especially his boyfriend, when he,
I mean,
stands up.
I thought that was pretty funny.
No, that's what it. But that's
Yeah.
the thing, that it was funny because you could say that you could have them be heterosexual, and you could still have a couple be upset that the other person was lying about their status. You know what I mean? Like, for 2001, like, that was actually, I wouldn't say progressive, but that was, I would say, Will and Grace had only been on the air for so many years, and I don't know, rewatching it, I actually thought that landed almost just as funny as it did back then. Not because it was like, ha ha ha, gay people in the courtroom. So much as it was just, it was very sneaky lawyer tactics, and then accentuated by this unfortunate squabble between two lovers, and I don't know. I just maybe the one scene prior to that was definitely dated, and ill-conceived, but it still didn't seem malicious, which is the one, about her essentially figuring out that he's gay, which is because, quote-unquote, gay men only know designers, whereas straight men don't.
Yeah.
However, sometimes stereotypes are true for a reason. I mean, I'm just saying,
I totally agree with you.
It's not like lawyers are not going to use shorthand for essentially. I mean, that's their job, So I don't know. Like it was weirdly.
Well,
it was weird how inoffensive I found 99% of this entire.
guess
I can see, like, by the standards of when the film came out, like, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I sort of read it in a different way, just because, like, I've had people make assumptions about my sexuality just because I happen to know the name of artists off the top of my head. That I'm able to name writers and directors and stuff like that. What are you, a gay boy? Because you, like, know where things come from? Like, I've had those experiences before.
Did they say that in that exact words?
No, they called me the F word. Yeah, so I decided to, like, ellipse that. So maybe
fair.
Maybe I just sort of square that differently, just because how there are assumptions that are loaded within gender and within the performance of gender that precludes people from necessarily being able to be honest about what their interests and what their passions are without them having that weaponized as a part of their identity against them. So,
I have to ask, and this we do not need to really get into this, but why was that guy covering? Like, did he just have something with Linda Cardellini's character?
That's an interesting question.
My guess was if
He probably was gonna
Brooke
get paid.
goes to prison, the daughter gets everything, the inheritance, so therefore he would get paid off. I mean,
Yeah.
that was
Okay.
what I thought was the whole thing.
I felt like
Like
when
if,
we got
if
to the
Brooke goes back and it's the other way, like he gets nothing. He's just a pool boy.
yeah,
But I thought the idea is that when a Cardellini character would have went to him and be like, yeah, I need to frame this person for this, and I also have access to Daddy's trust fund. So
okay.
that's what I figured.
I felt like after the resolution of the film, I thought it was kind of weird that he was trying to be like, no, we had sex. And
If
it's
this
like,
was a movie that was essentially hung upon an entire, case,
Yeah.
I would probably care. But because the case literally doesn't come up until halfway through the movie, and then just acts as a moment for Elle to advance her reputation and her self-worth, I'm totally fine with it.
cool. I'm getting caught up on the small details a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I understand what you're saying.
yeah. Hannah, what other thoughts do you have on this?
Well, as I mentioned during watching, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to mention it, Elle Woods did inspire me to make my resume pink.
It's important.
So it is not on pink paper, and it was not scented, but I incorporated elements of pink because, granted, I finished school much later than Elle Woods. Granted, I didn't go to law school, but my frame of reference is like creative, like to be myself, yet still professional. Slap some pink on there. So,
You've got a pink water bottle right now.
I do. I'm a pink
in front of
girl.
us.
I'm just a pink girl, man.
I'm a pink girl.
And I used to hate pink as a kid.
Oh.
So, anyway, this movie is just so much fun. Like,
Please continue.
Yes. Angry Nick just slammed.
Drop the phone.
Sure. The old dropping phone excuse. What was that?
I don't know what that was.
Cowering deer?
Nick is like, I'm wearing blue. You can't say that.
Now he's a cat. Okay.
Please tell us about your experience with pink. Not the Victoria's Secret brand, but just the color.
I was going
I
to say
can
that
talk about that too if you want, but I don't think they're
the pop artist who just won't go away.
your listeners want to hear about the underwear brand or the artist.
Oh, some of them might.
Anyway, just this movie means so much to me. I think if anything can inspire you to work hard and get what you want, even if circumstances like don't turn out the way that you want them to, and you still end up being happy and being motivated toward a goal that ends up being about your accomplishments and getting you to where you want to go, I think that is like ace. And as mentioned previously, some things really not that great about this movie, but I mean, still done well. I mean, I definitely remember when I was younger, don't tap those last season Prada shoes at me, and ever since then I'm like, okay, then no one I date is going to know the kind of shoes that I wear. They're just going to say they're black, which is fine. And, like, I think that's true. So yeah, I love this movie. Those are my final thoughts.
No.
Well, one thing I will say too,
Okay.
really quick, is that one thing I love about the structure of this movie is that we get the main character's realization of being over the ex, basically, much earlier than a normal rom-com. Because technically speaking, even though she gets that fun sign-off with him at the end...
There's no moment where, like, they become a couple again.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But even though we get the tell-offs scene toward the very end when she literally gets to, like, he gets to try to win her back or whatever, even before that, it's after the party, which is like the first 30 or so minutes, when she finally says, I'm never going to be enough for you. And for the fact that
She comes to that realization on her own.
Yeah, and in the
moves
first
around it.
30 minutes of it, and so that the rest of the movie is actually her wanting to be a lawyer for herself. Like, usually a movie of this kind would save that for the very end. And that's what makes the whole Callahan thing, I think, even more powerful, which is that she had started on this journey for herself before that point. And when that comes to pass... that becomes, a reminder of why she may have gotten into this in the first place, and therefore those doubts come back to her and whatnot. So I do want to applaud the fact that this movie does get that out of the way fairly early on for this kind of template, and in a way that's also not very like showy. The way she goes up to her Selma, Blair, and Warren, and says the whole hot tub line, and like, this is so much better than that. Like, that's the end of her and Warren. For the rest of the movie, even if he tries to win her back, like, she's never going to take him back, and that's kind of what makes his character all the more of a buffoon, that he would think that there's still interest there. Mm-hmm. But I very much appreciated that upon rewatch. So.
And I love the growth of the friendship between Reese Witherspoon and Selma Blair. That's one of my favorite elements of this entire film, honestly. Because we find out in the epilogue, as mentioned before, is that's how we find out that they become best friends, and you can see the growth of them, like, working under Callahan, and how he's just so sexist, and Selma Blair also always has to get his coffee and never asks Warren, and things like that, and then they have that common ground, and they build from that, and I think that's awesome.
Common grounds.
Yeah. Also, props to this movie.
Coffee shop.
Oh man, I get it now. That's good.
Sorry.
Also, props to this movie for never giving Luke Wilson a moment where he confronts Callahan, because that is a crutch that a lot of movies would take in trying to, quote-unquote, empower the female, where a man will then step in and essentially say, that's like, I should say a good man will step in and say, like, that's not right, or punch him, or whatever. What I kind of like is that he has his own outrage about it, because he does not agree with that. But it is up to Elle to essentially, pull herself together and to be okay with it, and it's not because he goes in there and tells him off and whatnot. So he's really not connected in any way with her path to reinvigorating her interest and determination to finish out her law school career. So I very much enjoyed that as well.
I would agree.
Yep.
Anna, you gave us your final thoughts. Do you have a rating that you'd want to give for this?
Oh dear, pretty sure my rating is 5 out of 5.
Okay.
That's fair.
That's a good rating. So my final score for this film would be a 3.5 out of 5, as I thought this was still quite good. I didn't love it, but I also thought it was a very good film that I enjoyed revisiting for the first time in a long time. I do think that there are moments in this movie that are pretty dated, but at the same time, a lot of what Anna, Tucson, and Nick have been talking about, and myself too, are very much true. Is that this is a film that has aged, but a lot of it has aged in a good way. Is it is a progressive character who is moving throughout the story, and also is just being herself and not becoming anything else for her new environment. I mean, she is and she isn't. Like, she's just procedurally doing the things you need to do to
She
succeed.
never compromises herself
Yeah.
in her new environment. Because, like, when she wears some of the outfits that she wears after the pink, so to speak, phase. Although she rocks it in the final courtroom day.
Yeah, agreed.
I didn't mean to take that away from
No,
her.
I was going to say, and it's funny because looking at, this is certainly not really a coming-of-age story, but if you look at...
It's a late coming-of-age story.
Yeah. If you look at a comparison between this and something of really this era, as I'm randomly just thinking about right now, which is the movie Lady Bird, when she goes off to college, it's funny because she has almost the exact opposite reaction, where she does almost completely conform to all of the tropes and standards or whatever of her new environment, as opposed to when she was very rebellious back in her previous home life across the country in California before moving to New York. And I don't necessarily think that's bad either, but it's interesting to look at the differences about that of somebody who is unapologetically going to remain themselves, whatever that self is. And they also are 4 years old, 4 years different as someone coming out of high school and someone who's finishing college. So that's a much different time in somebody's life. But at the same time, I think it is still interesting of somebody who is emphatically wanting to be something and then transforming into something different. And there's nothing really wrong with that either.
No,
So-
yeah, and I guess I would just throw this out there, but Lady Bird's journey is also based around the fact that she wasn't always conscious of how she affected others, whereas Elle is always being a good person and being a nice person.
Well put. So, 3.5 out of 5 for me for Legally Blonde. I think it's a very, very good film.
Hello! I'd like to rate the movie, too.
You sound like Garth from Wayne's World for whatever reason.
Thank you.
It's like 2 as in 2 or as in...
2 as in 200.
Okay, cool.
As in, like,
200.
I'd also like to rate it.
Okay.
What does he say? The gal in the movie is like, "Take me, Garth," and he's like, "Where do we go? It's late outside."
Oh, Garth, she meant sex. I give this movie a 3.5 out of 5 as well. I think it's really, really good, and I'm so glad that we rewatched it because it really did hold up better than I thought it would have in a very surprising way. And honestly, it's just been so long, and we just don't get this very often where we actually have a protagonist that is a good person. They don't have to learn to be a better person. They just learn that who they are is actually good enough because it's better than most people. And that is so refreshing and so empowering to anybody who watches, let alone the feminist subtext that, not even subtext, text that is on display, that I can't imagine what it would like to watch this back. Like, if I wasn't a guy and I watched this when I was 10 and whatnot, like that would have been even more off the charts and whatnot. So I'm a very, very big fan of this movie. While I don't think that is like perfect by any means, I could see why anybody would love this and or cite this as one of their favorite movies of all time.
I would give this a 3.5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it for a first viewing. Yeah, I would probably go back and see it again. That's it.
Okay. That's
Good stuff.
Yeah.
That's all.
Good stuff.
Oh, man. Devil Wears Prada. I like the Devil Wears Prada.
Oh,
I've never seen it.
I don't think I've
Oh,
ever
good.
watched
Damn.
it from
It's
like
so good.
start
It's
to
so
finish.
good.
I thought you.
I've
I
seen
thought
a lot of it,
you
but-
meant that as in, oh, good, it's awful. I was
No,
like, whoa,
no,
shit.
no,
Okay,
no.
damn. Okay.
I meant like, oh, it's so good. That's what I
Okay.
meant. Yeah.
All right. Like Spider-Man 3. It's so good.
In
Well,
gen-
that we know how we feel about that.
in general, I do not care for Meryl, and she's actually very good in that. And Anne Hathaway is good, and there's a lot of people. Emily Blunt. Early in her
Early
career.
Emily Blunt. I think that's one of her best roles for sure. Okay, well, that's just
Maybe.
me.
No, I mean she's not bad.
Fight.
No.
Fight. No, yes. Fight. Don't tell me no.
She's not bad, but her character was pretty limited in that, I thought. So, but yeah,
And then they would reunite.
Anna's liked her, so fuck off.
Yeah. Why are you being like this,
I'm not
Alex?
trying to be that way.
No, you're good. You're the look you gave me
Alex.
was pretty
Not
good.
Alex. Why did I look at Anna? Alex. How dare you?
That's a crackly voice. What? Oh, so good. I'm glad we all enjoyed Legally Blonde, and I'm really glad you brought this up, even if it was originally as a joke. And I'm really glad that we ended
I'm
up.
glad that this came to fruition.
Also, I have to shout out this because Dan is going to think this is hilarious. But Dan's wonderful partner, Heidi, brought this up the other day and called us out because we don't do a lot of female-directed movies. Now, it's ironic because this movie is not female-directed. It was, the screenplay was written by two women, and it was based off of a book by a female author, but it still doesn't quite count. Now, it was funny because I did point out more movies than they had realized that we had done, but it was still not nearly enough as to, our overall, whatever. But anyway, I've thus learned that this is one of her favorite movies of all time.
Oh.
So I feel like while it's not quite in the ballpark of what they were rightfully calling us out for, and they were not being malicious whatsoever.
Okay.
They just kind of pointed it out, and I was like, no, you're absolutely right. And then I was like, but also look at these. And then, but I hope that this is a small olive branch to our listener base, because you know what? We are, for the most part, three dudes on an average, episode and whatnot. And so it is nice to always take input from our guests because we should look outside of ourselves.
Did we do an episode on the lore? I don't remember.
The lore?
Yeah.
No, we have not.
Okay.
I mean, we talked about it on the Sundance episode. But
Yeah.
no, we haven't.
Okay. Has Toussaint seen that?
I don't think so, actually.
I have.
You have?
You have.
Is that the one with the? Is that the musical mermaid film?
Yeah.
We have watched that.
We watched it?
Yeah, we've watched it.
We
here.
did watch it. We
Yeah.
watched it with Sam.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we
Randomly,
even did
I
an
think
episode on that, maybe.
We didn't do an episode, but I
Okay.
think you gave it to me for my birthday, but then gave it to me that day with the intention of and we should watch it tonight, and,
Okay.
and that's what we did.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Anyway.
It's been a while since I've
I
seen
will
it.
say I think I've mentioned this before off mic. The Sundance episode is probably my favorite episode you guys have ever done. I love it.
Well, now we have to go back. We really should, though.
Yeah. It was a good time.
Yeah.
That I described it in detail, but that theater experience, seeing the lore, was
Wonderful.
You don't really get those kind of experiences, unfortunately, just in real life, where you're just like, oh, there are those two people. Oh, and there they are on the screen, and they're just sitting in front of us, giggling to each other, ah.
I know, they were so excited to watch it. It was great.
Yeah. So, anyone out there have any thoughts on Legally Blonde? Please send them on to us at filmtankshow@gmail.com, or find us on Facebook or Twitter at filmtankshow as well. So, speaking of Dan, he will be joining us on our next episode.
Hey.
When we are going to be talking about the film Midnight Run.
Yeah.
So, I've actually never seen this, so I'm very excited to check it out and also talk about it with you guys.
It is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Wow.
It is on the list.
Okay. Is it on? And I don't know if he has a list like you.
I
do.
was gonna
Is
say
it
I
on
don't know if it's an
Dan's
actual
list?
concrete list, but it is definitely a movie that if I think he made a list, it would be on it because of how much me and him talk about it.
Okay.
So I would definitely say if it's not on the list, it's spiritually on his list.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, Midnight Run with Robert De Niro, right?
Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin,
Okay.
or Grodin, I guess.
Yeah.
The guy from Beethoven.
That's actually where I know him from.
Sadly,
too.
that's where most people know him from, even though he's done much better work and much better movies.
Yeah. So, looking forward to that coming up on our next episode. Anna, as always, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, as always.
We always love having you and hanging out and watching movies and talking about movies. So this is, as always, a lot of fun. So, again, thank you very much. And from Anna and Toussaint, Nick, myself, Alex, thank you very much for listening to us here at Film Tank. And we'll catch up with you next time.